Thanks to big home runs by Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso, the New York Mets rally back from down 4 runs late to beat the Orioles in extra innings.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the New York Mets are suddenly looking like the offensive juggernaut that we hoped they would be going into this season. The team that can get down 6-2 and find their way back in the game with some late inning heroics. And it really was a tale of two games for the New York Mets. You had the first 5 innings of what ended up being a 10-inning game where the Mets could do absolutely nothing offensively. And Clay Holmes was actually carrying the Mets to the first 5, really keeping them in the game against Brandon Young, the Orioles rookie, who was dominant. Then in the latter 5 innings, we saw a completely different story for the Mets offense, but also for Clay Holmes. But let's start off with Brandon Young, the Orioles rookie starting pitcher, who went into this start with an ERA over 7. On yesterday's show, when I was doing the series preview, I had the thought as I was talking about Brandon Young to point out what I have in the past when the Mets are about to square off against an unproven rookie who maybe has had a rougher start to the big league career. And I'll say, oh, this is the type of guy that's going to dominate the Mets because these are the guys that always dominate the Mets, the guys that you don't expect who have yet to really prove anything in the big leagues. And I decided I'm not going to say that. Let's not jinx it. Maybe I should have said it because by not saying it, maybe I ended up willing it into existence. Maybe if I did say it, maybe I would have reverse jinxed it. It wouldn't have happened. But regardless, Brandon Young was actually really good. And this is a guy that won the, as we learned during the broadcast, the Orioles minor league pitcher of the year last year. Granted, that is an Orioles farm system that is way more skewed towards their position players, but still impressive nonetheless. And you saw, what could be a very good starting pitcher one day, because through the first 5, the Mets could do nothing with Brandon Young. He struck out 2 in the first, Nimmo and Soto, 1 in the second, Pete Alonso. 3rd inning, he worked around a 2-out single by Brett Baty. 4th inning, Juan Soto gets a 1-out single, but then Young was able to still retire the side in order because he gets Pete Alonso to hit into a double play. In the 5th inning, the Mets suffered a form of embarrassment that I wasn't expecting against Brandon Young, an immaculate inning. The kid struck out the side on exactly 9 pitches, the minimum, as Winker, McNeil, and Torrens went down in order, all via strikeouts. Brandon Young was at 54 pitches through the first 5 innings with 6 strikeouts and just 2 hits allowed, no walks. Pretty unbelievable. Amazingly, though, he would only retire 1 more batter for the rest of the game. With the Mets trailing 1-0 through the first 5, Ronny Mauricio comes up to the plate in the 6th inning with the chance to tie the game with 1 swing of the bat, and he did exactly that. Got a changeup that was supposed to be low and away. Instead, it bled in. It was low and in, right in Mauricio's wheelhouse, and he was able to put a great swing on it, put it down the right field line for a home run that tied the game. Then you saw Brett Baty work a good count, get himself a nice pitch to hit, and he rips a double. Then you have Brandon Nimmo, who doubled in Baty. All of a sudden, the Mets flip the script, have a 2-1 lead. After getting Francisco Lindor to fly out, the Orioles went to the bullpen because Juan Soto was coming up and they wanted a lefty to face him. Soto actually ripped one into right center field, 110 miles per hour off the bat. It looked like it was destined to be another double, but Ramon Laureano made a great catch that robbed Soto. Then after Pete Alonso was intentionally walked, Mark Vientos came in to pinch it for Jesse Winker and grounded out to end the threat. I'm going to talk about that at bat more in the next segment. But here was Clay Holmes, who, again, through the first 5 innings was really good. He's now spotted a 2-1 lead, and all of a sudden it all falls apart for him. Prior to that 6th inning, he gave up just 3 singles and 1 walk, struck out 5, allowed just 1 run when the 1 walk that he issued came back to bite him in the 3rd inning as Jackson Holliday got an RBI single. In the 6th inning, it was Holliday that was up again, and he got hit by a pitch to lead off a rally as you then saw base hits by Jordan Westberg. Gunnar Henderson loaded the bases with a single, And then Ryan O'Hearn, the Orioles all-star, doubled in 2. Then they still stay with Holmes, who gave a base hit after that scored 2 more. And at that point, after giving up 5 runs in 5 and a third innings pitch? Or he didn't get it out, did he? Not even a single out from Holmes in that 6th inning. He was pulled, and it turned from a great start into a brutal one. Now, you might wonder, why did Carlos Mendoza not have anybody up in that 6th inning? Why did he let him give up, 4 consecutive hits? 1, 2, 3, 4 consecutive hits after hitting a batter. I would say, look at the stat that they put up during the broadcast, which, of course, they put up right before Ryan O'Hearn doubled in 2. But going into that at-bat, Clay Holmes was the best in baseball with runners in scoring position, a 111 batting average against. The thing about Clay Holmes that has been so special this year is he brings that closer mentality from the past of being able to pitch himself in and out of jams. He's been able to get the ground ball when he needs it. And if you look at the 2 hits that he gave up after he hit Jackson Holliday, they weren't well-struck baseballs. They were good pieces of hitting where guys were able to dump balls into the outfield, but they were not struck well. It's not like he was getting rocked. It was just some unfortunate placed balls after hitting a batter, and now the bases are loaded, and now you're prone to a couple of bad pitches to all of a sudden unravel was a really good start. So I don't blame Carlos Mendoza for keeping Clay Holmes out there. He was at 71 pitches entering that 6th inning. While the Mets are getting reinforcements this week, they still really only have 3. Well, Clay Holmes is going to pitch again on Sunday, so I'll say that counts. But I'd say you have 3 traditional starts this week out of 6 games. You had this one. You have David Peterson going tonight. You'll have Frankie Montas pitching on Saturday, and then you're going to have 2 guys coming off rehab. So I get still being in the mentality of trying to steal some outs, and even not even that though. Clay Holmes has been one of your best pitchers. So I really don't blame them for that, but at the same time, it did put the Mets into a pretty big hole. Luckily, they had enough firepower to claw their way out of it. I want to talk about the Mets' comeback in the next segment here, and also if they've now unlocked what is ideally their perfect lineup. Today's episode is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency like a burst pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, are you really going to wait around? No, you're going to call the next one. That's why having a reliable business line is so important. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication from an app on your phone or computer. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this, and the AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer again. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Mets listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnMLB. If you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now, after Holmes exited in the 6th inning, Dickie Lovelady came in to face the lefty Colton Cowser, got him to fly out for the first out of the 6th. He then hit Tyler O'Neill with a pitch before getting a ground out off the bat of Cedric Mullins. At that point, Carlos Mendoza goes to Alex Carrillo, the new addition to this bullpen, and Carillo threw a 99-mile-per-hour first strike. And then Luis Torrens picked off the runner at third base, Ramon Laureano. There was a runner trying to steal. It's runners at first and third. So he faked at third and second and then picked off Laureano at third. So Carillo got a very easy first big league out. In the 7th inning, he gave up a solo homer to Jackson Holliday on a center cut fastball. But other than that, he did look pretty impressive. This is a guy that has a ton of life on his fastball. He can ring it up to 100 miles per hour. And you see a very deceptive delivery. He sort of hides the baseball a little bit as he lifts his front shoulder and throws from an interesting arm slot. You can see why the Mets really like this guy as a funky reliever who has really good stuff. You saw this sharp break on his slider. Didn't find the location on that pitch quite enough in this outing, but still you can see the makings of a quality offering. He He has a newfound changeup that is supposed to be really devastating as well. And I've talked about Carillo a lot on this show as a potential guy that could get called up any day now. Now we see him up at the big league level. The reason being, he found something and it's been lights out for some time. He started the year in Double-A, had a rough first couple outings, walked 5, gave up 6 runs in his first 4 appearances. Then he locked in, gave up just 3 runs over his next 14 and a third with 19 strikeouts to 3 walks. Gets promoted up to Triple-A, where he did not allow a run in 4 appearances, struck out 10 in 5 2/3 innings pitched without allowing a hit or a walk. So he was perfect in Triple-A. That's how you get yourself up to the show. And it'll be interesting to see what he looks like as a potential high leverage arm for the Mets. I think they're going to give him some run here as they try to get to the break, and then beyond that, just trying to find some pieces that can be leverage arms. This is a guy that has the stuff to be a leverage arm. It's just a matter of if he can have the mentality to do it, as he's a rookie who was in indie ball last year and all of a sudden he's in the big league. So a great story there with Carillo, and he was nearly the beneficiary of a win because after his 7th inning where he gave just 1 run and the Mets were trailing 6-2, they had a monster 8th inning. Brandon Nimmo, great at bat, fell behind, still was able to get on base with a single. Francisco Lindor, very reminiscent of 2024 and all the big home runs. He hits a 2-run shot to cut the lead in half. Then Juan Soto gets a base hit. Pete Alonso comes up, sees a slider off the plate, and he just goes with it and absolutely crushes the baseball to deep, deep right center field for a game-tying home run. Pete was absolutely fired up after that homer. He was imploring Mark Vientos to do the same. I'm going to talk about that in a second here, but to sort of round out the rest of this game, Reed Garrett pitches a scoreless 8th, and he was aided by a great double play turn by Ronny Mauricio with runners at first and second. Mauricio got a ground ball that took him toward the bag. He fielded it, touched third, fired over across his body to first. Pete Alonso made a great play to stay on the bag and stretch out to catch a throw that was a little bit wide, and the Mets were able to get out of that inning. The Mets failed to score in the 9th inning off of the Orioles closer Felix Bautista. Edwin Diaz held serve in the bottom half. In the 10th inning, Juan Soto comes up and does what you always wish would happen with the ghost runner on second base. First pitch he saw, punched it into the outfield. None of that worry about, are the Mets going to score the ghost runner? Are they going to at least put themselves in a position to survive the 10th where they're not trailing with a runner on second base in the bottom half? And Soto just eased all that concern with one quick swing of the bat. The Mets loaded the bases, were unable to score further, though. Didn't matter because Huascar Brazovan came on, and all of a sudden, he's pitching pretty well again. A couple good appearances in a row. He was able to get through really the heart of that lineup, 2, 3, 4, Jordan Westberg, Gunnar Henderson, and Ryan O'Hearn, and set them down in order, kept the ghost runner stapled to second base. So a great save by him, great win by the Mets. But what I wanted to talk about, too, is how I really think this team might have just unlocked their best lineup. I was talking about this allowing yesterday's show, so we're sort of building off of that. This idea that Jesse Winker being activated might be the one big bat and maybe the only big bat that the Mets add in July, because honestly, I don't think they need anything else. And we will talk about this more next week as I get into the options the Mets have. But today, Winker was activated. Starling Marte, as I predicted on yesterday's show, put on the IL. Made too much sense. He got a gel injection in his knee just to calm things down. It's just the active career leader in stolen bases right now, Major League Baseball, who's got some worn out knees. That's it. And so he gets a nice little 2-week vacation for the All-Star break to get himself right, and he should be activated as soon as the Mets get out of the break. But this gave the Mets an opportunity to put out a lineup that included Ronny Mauricio, Brett Baty, and Jesse Winker, really stacking lefties against a right-handed arm. So the Mets went with Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, Alonso. We've seen that 4. Jesse Winker batted in the 5-hole, Jeff McNeil 6th, Luis Torrens 7th to break up the 4 left-handed bats to finish off that lineup. Then you have Mauricio and Baty. And we saw Mauricio, of course, with the big home run, Baty with the double. Baty had a couple of hits, a really nice game by him. And we've been seeing Mauricio play second base a lot lately. Today it was third, and I think the thought behind that was probably Clay Holmes. It's a ground ball pitcher. You have a lot of lefties in that Orioles lineup. Have your better fielder in Baty over at second base where you might get more action. And instead, it was Mauricio that made a couple of really nice plays, had a great defensive game. The versatility the Mets have with those two guys able to play second and third base, and for Mauricio, even to flex out and play some shortstop if they ever want to get Lindor off his feet. It does unlock a lot of flexibility when it comes to setting your lineup and in game, because now you can go to the bench and you could have pinch hit Mark Vientos for one of those lefties at some point to step in and play third, and whoever is, if he fills in for whoever's starting at third, great. And if it's, Baty who's playing second and whatever it is, you can always maneuver those guys around where if he pinch hits for the second baseman, the guy who's playing third can shift over to second. You have McNeil who can come in from center. There's so much flexibility with this roster. And suddenly Vientos' role could be very simplified. He might just be the guy that needs to hit lefties. And so that's a different role for him, but it's a role that he had previously and outperformed to the point last year where he did get the everyday job. But maybe that's what the Mets are doing here. I put out a poll today on YouTube, or this morning for I guess for you guys listening today on Tuesday. Regardless, the poll went up, and it was, how much faith do you have in Mark Vientos turning it on in the second half? Only 9% of the audience said 100% confident he'll turn it around. But 51% agreed with hopeful and willing to bet on him and the other young Mets. Then you had 18% that said better luck next year, bench him and make a trade for a replacement at third. And then 21% said cut bait now and trade Vientos at the deadline. So 40% of the audience is done with Mark Vientos this year. 20% is just completely done with him. And then you have 60% of the audience that says, yeah, he might be fine. Most of them are probably betting on the collective more than just Vientos. But that's where I'm at too, because all of a sudden, you look at this lineup and the way that Mauricio and Baty are playing. For one, you got a really solid defensive infield. That's great. And you have Ronny Mauricio now against right-handed pitching. He's hitting 277 with a 347 on base and a 508 slug. That's an 855 OPS with 4 home runs and 65 at-bats. He's homering about every 16 at-bats. So that's a home run every 4 or 5 games. Ronny Mauricio could be your starting second baseman or your starting third baseman. And Baty has been showing a lot of signs lately. The fact that you have all these different irons in the fire, you can just play the hot hand. And so now it simplifies things for Vientos. And what I will say about Vientos in this game, because of the flexibility that the roster has and the way that they stack their lineup, you were able to get an advantageous matchup for Vientos when he entered the game in the 6th inning, because the Orioles grabbed a lefty to face Soto. They then, with a runner on base, intentionally walked Pete Alonso after they got Soto out. So Mark Vientos comes on to pinch hit for Jesse Winker with runners at the corners, a chance to potentially break the game open at that point because it was a 2-1 score at the time. Vientos does not chase, gets himself into a hitter's count, 2-0, swings at the pitch that he's supposed to, hits it hard on the ground, ends up grounding out to end the inning. So not a great result, but I was looking at the swing decisions, pretty good. Next to bat in the 8th inning after Pete Alonso's home run ties the game. As I mentioned, as Pete is coming home and he gets up to Mark, you can read his lips, let's bleep and go. It's on you now, Mark. You got this, whatever. But you could see him really trying to pump up confidence in Vientos because his teammates still believe in him. I think the Mets believe in him to a certain extent, but you also have to combat what he's done this season, which is why he got pinch hit for in his final at-bat. But in this at-bat in the 8th inning, I didn't think it was that bad. Falls behind the count 1-2. The second strike call was a little bit low. You could have definitely quibbled with that. It's not necessarily a pitch to hit. He then does not chase, evens the count, fouls off of a couple close pitches. On the 7th pitch of the at-bat, he hammers one 98 miles per hour off the bat. He just got under it a little bit. The launch angle was 36 degrees. If the launch angle of that baseball is 32 degrees, I promise you that ball's in the seats. The Mets, all of a sudden, after having the 2 home runs hit by Lindor and Alonso, have a third one. It's a go-ahead homer. Mark Vientos is fired up, running on the bases, and you might have his confidence back. I don't think you're that far removed from getting that guy. These at-bats lately, there's been enough of them that I have seen where, sure, he has not gotten the results. He might not have gotten a hit off of the IL for all I know at this point. It feels like he hasn't. But I have seen these little at-bats that are giving me indications that he's not chasing out of the zone all the time. He's not swinging at the wrong pitches. He's just not handling his pitches and that could turn around. But Mauricio is taking the pressure off of him, as is Baty, where, yeah, sure, he might be losing playing time to these guys, but he might not be losing a roster spot. He might not be getting traded. He can't get optioned. So the Mets either have to just park him on their bench or they trade him. And I think if these other guys keep playing well, you can just trust the collective because you have a lot of good options, and you have Luis Acuna is playing okay in AAA. I don't think that he's necessarily going to hit for you this year, but as I talked about on yesterday's show, that's always an elite defender that you can plug in at any point as well. I think the roster that's going to work for the Mets is basically what you had out there today, with Travis Jankowski being sub for Luis Acuna. And I think in September, when the rosters expand, it's natural to then add Acuna. In the meantime, when Marte comes back, you dump Jankowski. And guess what? Starling Marte, if those knees are all right, he can always pinch run a little bit. And Tyrone Taylor can pinch run. We saw him do that in the game today. He stole a base. So I think the Mets have enough on this roster where they're going to have 13 quality players at any given time. And then really the only decision is going to be, and this is all barring health, because obviously health can throw a wrench into any of this. But if they stay healthy, then it's just going to be deciding who makes a playoff roster eventually if the Mets can get there. But I really like this combination. Mark Vientos has the hit left-handers, but having right now for this week, Winker and Vientos splitting the DH duties, I think that's a good enough role for him, and that could continue. I don't really see a problem with Marte eventually getting relegated to a bench role and then potentially just being left off of a playoff roster if everybody else hits. But Vientos competing now with Winker and Marte for DH at-bats, while Mauricio and Baty might have just solidified this infield, that could be the ideal version of the New York Mets. But to close out the show, I want to talk about the Mets setting their rotation for the rest of the week. And I've been really wanting to talk about Binghamton, so we're going to fly through some Rumble Ponies action to close out the show, all of that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in the game with while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh daily with new promotions, fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. You get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, the Mets have set their rotation for this week mostly. They have not officially announced a starter for Thursday, although that's expected to be Justin Hageman. Obviously, you got David Peterson going tonight, and you'll just see if you need Hageman, but assuming you don't, Hageman probably starts on Thursday, and then you might have, or he could always have an opener, and he's the bulk guy, but the weekend series is basically set. So you're going to have Kodai Senga, who threw a bullpen today, make a start on Friday, might be on a little bit of a limited pitch count. I would think he's going to have at least 75 pitches to give, if not 85. Might not have a full 100 yet, but it's good to get Kodai Senga back, and I'll take 75 pitches from Kodai Senga over 55 pitches from Brandon Waddell, and then trying to get a Jonathan Pintara. Who knows what the Mets would have done. This is great that they're getting Senga back. Frankie Montas could have pitched on Thursday instead of Hageman, but they have instead announced him as the starter on Saturday. So he's got pretty much a week off in between starts. He started on Saturday against the Yankees. We'll have a Saturday start again for his final start of the first half. And then on Sunday, you are likely to get Sean Manaea either starting or following up Clay Holmes, as those two guys will piggyback that outing. Now, Manaea made his final rehab start in Syracuse tonight. He went 3 2/3, gave up 3 runs on one swing of the bat, a 3-run homer, allowed 4 hits, walked 1, struck out 5, threw 73 pitches. So all went well. Sure, you'd like to see him have 4 shutout innings or 5 shutout innings on 73 pitches with 8 strikeouts, something incredible. But at the same time, we're not going to read too much into a rehab start. The good news is he got the pitch count up almost to 75, and you should expect it to have a pretty regular workload where the Mets, who knows, they might only need 2 arms on Sunday, but they're going to have a couple of quality ones with Manaea and Holmes. Now, Brooks really followed up Manaea, and he came in with 2 runners on base, helped Manaea strand them, got a fly out to get out of that inning. Then he worked a scoreless 5th, aided by a caught stealing by Francisco Alvarez. Brooks Raley has yet to allow a run on his rehab appearances. He is going to be up in a big part of this bullpen soon. I think they're going to continue to just play it cautious, have him finished off the week in Syracuse. He could probably pitch back-to-backs at some point this week to just get that hurdle cleared. He got 4 outs. That's another hurdle that he cleared in this one. I think it's the second time he's gone multiple innings in one of these appearances. So Raley is trending towards a second-half return. He could be a very big piece for this bullpen. Blade Tidwell finished up that game in Syracuse, a big Mets win, allowed 2 runs on 4 hits and 2 walks. I think they won 13-5. But I talked about it on yesterday's show. I wanted to spend some time on Binghamton, and I'm going to run through it because I don't have enough time on the show. Otherwise, I'm going to do like an hour podcast diving into each individual player and what they've done this season. But what I will say, this was the day to talk about Binghamton because they had a rout. They scored 16 runs on 19 hits. Jet Williams from the leadoff spot went 3 for 5 with 3 doubles. Carson Bench batting second went 3 for 4 with 2 doubles. Ryan Clifford, who was batting cleanup, he homered twice, drove in 7 runs. He's now up to 17 home runs on the season. And then you had not too much from Nick Morabito and Jacob Reimer. But if you look at this Binghamton lineup right now, you can say that arguably the top 5 position player prospects are all playing together in Double-A. That is how much the Mets have loaded up this lineup. Jet Williams, who is due for a promotion to Triple-A any day now. Carson Bench, Nick Morabito, who is probably the one guy that I might not put in that top 5. I probably put AJ Ewing over Morabito at this point, but it's close, and maybe I'm just falling on my just baseball bias because I know Aaron Bladen, who knows prospects better than anyone and does our top 100 for just baseball, had AJ Ewing on the outside looking in, that there's a little more impact in the bat with Ewing than Morabito, and that's why he's a little bit more of a higher touted prospect. But Morabito was the Mets player of the year in the minor leagues last year. He's had a good season in Double-A. So if he's not the 5th best prospect in this system on the position player side, he's somewhere among the top 10 position players in this system for sure, and comfortably within that. But your top 3 right now, position player prospects, in my eyes, Jet Williams, Carson Bench, probably Jacob Reimer, but Ryan Clifford, there's even a debate there, as Clifford has a lot of impact in his bat, and he just got the Double-A before everybody else, but he's still super young as well. There's a lot of talent in Double-A right now. It's really exciting to see them all together because that's your next wave of Mets. Now, what I think fans have to remember as they're getting a little bit exhausted by this current wave, the Mauricio, Baty, Vientos, Alvarez wave, is it's going to take time. You put those 4 guys or those 5 guys in an MLB game right now, they're not going to play well. It's going to take an adjustment, but you have the capital to make moves at the deadline, and you have players that can filter up through the system soon and really give you some more impact position players that can really help you. So, hey, if long-term it's not going to work with Mauricio, Baty, and Vientos, well, maybe it works with Jet Williams, Jacob Reimer, and Ryan Clifford. So really exciting stuff there. And then you look at the rotation in Double-A, even that's loaded. Jonah Tong, we've talked about all year. Don't need to spend too much time on him. 1.83 ERA, 125 strikeouts in 15 starts, and 78 and 2/3 innings pitched. He should be in Triple-A in the second half. You have Jack Wenninger, who's made 16 starts this year in Double-A. He's been great. 2.76 ERA. He's gotten to 100 strikeouts. The Mets right now are the first team that have 2 prospects who have crossed over 100 strikeouts in the minor leagues together. That's Tong and Wenninger. You have Zach Thornton, who's been up in Double-A for some time now, made 4 starts in High A to begin the year, only allowed 1 earned run, ends up in Double-A, across 10 starts now. He's pitching to a 2.60 ERA. This is a left-handed starting pitcher. Another guy that's in that next tier below your Jonah Tong, Noel McLean, Brandon Sproat. your top 3 pitching prospects, but Wenninger, Thornton, Jonathan Santucci, who just got promoted, is another guy that's in that next wave of guys coming. RJ Gordon got promoted with him. So 2 more starting pitchers are brought into the fold in Binghamton. For Santucci, he had a brutal start to the season, an 8.14 ERA. Again, this is the Mets' second-round pick last year. So high expectations going into the year. I said he was going to be the Mets' pitching prospect of the year going into the season. But I will say, in my defense, that was part of a bold predictions episode, and I didn't find it very bold to pick Noel McLean or Jonah Tong to be the pitching prospect of the year. So I said, all right, bold prediction, Jonathan Santucci. Early on, wasn't great for Santucci, 8.14 ERA through his first 6 starts in high A. But since then, he lowered that ERA by 5 runs, basically. He, in his final 9 starts or 9 outings, allowed 7 runs in 56 and 2/3 innings pitched to a 1.11 ERA to the point where his ERA in high A was, let me pull it up exactly, but it was in the 3s. So huge difference for Santucci, another left-handed reliever. Another left-handed pitcher. He has a 3.46 ERA on the season now, and he will be making his first Double-A start at some point, I believe, later on this week. RJ Gordon, not as highly touted, 13th round pick last year, but another guy who's thrown the ball very well in high A, 3.06 ERA, 76 strikeouts in 67 and 2/3 innings pitched. This organization is absolutely loaded with pitching talent right now. I believe they still have Noah Hall in Brooklyn, and he's had a great season too, where maybe they're waiting for a Jonah Tong promotion to call him up. But yeah, Noah Hall on the year in high A has a 2.65 ERA in 71 and 1/3 innings pitched with 78 strikeouts. So that's another guy that's right there. This is where the Mets have the capability at the deadline to get anything they want. Now, I don't think you just trade prospects to trade prospects, because you can continue to stockpile and maybe a superstar comes available in the offseason. Maybe this time you do have the capital to trade for Garrett Crochet without gutting the top of your farm, because all of a sudden you have that depth. I mean, the reason the Red Sox were able to pull off that trade for Crochet and do it pretty comfortably is, yes, Kyle Teal was one of their top prospects, but their big 3, what they were calling their big 3, they were able to stay away from. That's Marcelo Meyer, Christian Campbell, and Roman Anthony. We've seen all those guys play for the Red Sox this year. The Mets, if they were to make the Crochet trade in the offseason, it would have been Jet Williams, Brandon Sproat, who knows what else would have had to go the other way. They didn't want to do that because at the time, you didn't have all this depth behind those guys. Now, all of a sudden, you have more depth, but also that depth can be what you trade. All of a sudden, Jonathan Santucci is a really good pitching prospect that you can move that would really move the needle. And that's something I'll be talking about more on one of our shows next week, as again, I'm really prepping out this trade deadline week where we're going through the All-Star break and priming you for the deadline that's a couple weeks beyond it. And I'm going to do a show about what assets the Mets have at the deadline, which prospects should they hold on to, who's untouchable, when should they maybe bend and say, okay, in this particular trade, it would be okay to give up a Jet Williams, or maybe they would be willing to give up one of their top 3 arms if it was in this particular trade. So I'm really looking forward to doing that show where I can give you kind of a asset related prospect episode where we talk about who's got the most value and what the Mets can put on the table. But again, if you look at Binghamton, you see 5 hitters in that lineup that are really talented prospects and 5 pitchers in their rotation that are very talented. And then Joander Suarez, who just continues to put up decent numbers in the minor leagues, but might not ever get a chance with the Mets, to my dad's dismay. We've had a lot of conversation about Joander Suarez. He doesn't understand why he's not more of a prospect. But regardless, the Mets have so much talent in Double-A right now, and that just breeds a very bright future for this Mets club that has a long window to contend with superstars in tow and talent in the farm to do whatever they have to continue to build out a World Series contender year over year over year. A lot of great stuff ahead for this Mets franchise. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. We wrapped it up in 40 minutes. I think that's pretty good. Locked On Podcast Network's not going to come after me for going too long on a given show. I appreciate all of you for spending the whole time with me. For those of you who've made it this far, as always, thank you all for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on your podcast feed, Follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure if you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, you find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll take you around all the action of Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts. You can find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.